Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have picked 8 important articles. There are 4 articles which require a detailed analysis as they are important both for your prelims and mains, and few small articles which are relevant only for the prelims exam. So let's cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking the session, benefiting from the initiatives, do support us with your likes, your comments, because that is what keeps us motivated to keep doing better for you. Our goal is to make this platform a one-stop destination for all your current affairs needs. So with this, let's get started. But before that, we have a very important announcement. The Liberty Batch, which is our online English classroom program, has just started from yesterday. This is a comprehensive program both for prelims and mains, especially for 2025 aspirants. So through this online batch, you will get to access live classes from India's top educators. And you also get prelims and mains test series with doubt resolution and mentorship sessions as well. So if you're interested to enroll for the program, today is the right day for this, as you get to join the program at just $24,999. So those interested can use the link provided in the video description, or you can contact the number provided over here. With this, let's get started by looking at the first article from page number 1 and 9. This article deals with the topic of Hindi as an official state language. The article gives us an opportunity to talk about the important topic of official languages. And this topic also happens to be very sensitive and controversial as well. In fact, in today's newspaper, we have another related article on page number 3 with regard to official language of communication used in the higher judiciary in our high courts and Supreme Court. So I would like to merge all these articles and have an elaborate discussion on this important sensitive topic. See, this article on the front page, it only gives us an update regarding an event that was marked by the central government. The government of India marked the 75th anniversary of Hindi being recognized and used as the official state language of India, or the Rajabhasha. So yesterday, the Akhil Bharatiya Rajabhasha Sammelan was held to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Hindi being used as an official state language. During this event, Union Home Minister Amit Shah, who was addressing the event, he urged Indian parents to encourage their children to talk in their mother tongue, to promote Indian languages and to get rid of the colonial legacy and the colonial hangover and our obsession with the English language. So this point raised by Amit Shah in itself, even though it might have a good intention, could trigger a controversy in several states. This leads to criticism as well against the state that it is a part of Hindi imposition on non-Hindi speaking states. But of course, the government has a valid justification as well. So that is why it is important to look at our constitutional provisions when it comes to official languages and official state language. And also Amit Shah has pointed out that under his ministries, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Cooperation, he has completely eliminated English as a language of communication. Be it any files or notings and records which are brought to his attention and notice, all this communication happening in MHA and Ministry of Cooperation has been shifted entirely to Hindi, according to Amit Shah. So he says that this is a step towards removing the colonial legacy, getting rid of our English obsession and promoting our national languages, our official languages. So let's see what the Constitution says about official languages. See, under Article 343, the official state languages are identified. Under Clause 1, the Constitution clearly says that the official language of communication for the union government within the central government will be Hindi with Devanagari script. But however, Clause 2 provides for an exception. given the linguistic diversity of India and given the wide acceptance of English as a common medium of communication, Clause 2 of Article 343 and the corresponding section under Official Language Act of 1963, it allows English to be used, it allows for the continuation of English language as an official state language for all official purposes within the central government and even within the parliament. For any communication between ministries, for file notings and records and drafts within the ministries, English can be continued according to the constitution as it is the best possible link language in a highly diverse country like India. India is a country with thousands of different languages, linguistic dialects, and thus we represent one of the few countries in the world which has such immense linguistic diversity. So in any such country, imposing one language or placing one language as a state language could be problematic, leading to even linguistic divisions and regional divisions. So to promote the continuation of English for official communication, exception was provided under Clause 2 of Article 343. Now, if you look at the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution, there are 22 official languages recognized to represent the linguistic diversity of India. Now, under Article 343, we understood that Hindi with Devanagari script is the recognized official state language or the Rajbhasha for official communication within the central government and the parliament. The exception is under Clause 2, where English can be continued as it is the best link language possible. And it also empowers the president to authorize the use of Hindi in addition to English for any official purpose of the union. Then the president can even constitute an official language commission under Article 344 to look into the needs of official language, the changes that needs to be brought into the policy, the need to promote Indian vernacular languages. So all such terms of references can be given to an official language commission which can be constituted by the President of India. Now you might ask, sir, you're talking about union government and parliament and the language of communication that they can use. But how about regional languages? How do state governments communicate? How about state legislatures, state government departments? What language do they use for communication? Even this is provided under the Constitution. Article 345 mandates that the legislature of a state, the concerned state legislature, will determine which language will be used for communication, that is official communication within that state. So it could either be Hindi itself or any of the 22 official languages, right? And of course, English could also be continued. And this matter is left to the discretion of the concerned state legislatures. Article 346 states that when one state has to communicate with another, or when state has to communicate with union and union has to communicate with the states, right? The official state languages are to be used, which is Hindi, English. But in non-Hindi speaking states, let's say the center wants to communicate with Kerala or Karnataka, right, which are clearly non-Hindi speaking states. So here the communication has to be in English. The center can't simply send letters, orders in Hindi because these are non-Hindi speaking states. So it's clearly pointed out under the Official Language Act that when any communication is being done between states, obviously English or preferably Hindi could be the link language. But when center is communicating with non-Hindi speaking states, English has to be the medium of communication. Same goes for communication between a Hindi speaking state and a non-Hindi speaking state. So communication preferably is in English as it happens to be the most preferred link that connects India linguistically, right? But however, the government does have a valid point. Have we become too convenient with English as our medium of communication? Is this a result of colonial legacy, colonial hangover? Is it a result of the perceived superiority of English and the perceived inferiority of Indian languages? So if this is the social perception, doesn't this affect the well-being of our languages, which is integral to human society and our very evolution? So are we compromising our historical, cultural, social values just because there is an obsession with the English language, which could be a result of the colonial hangover. So that is a valid point, and accordingly the government does everything possible to promote Indian languages, not just Hindi, but all the official languages and even the smaller dialects and regional local languages which are spoken. So if you look at the criticism that comes in, several states and non-Hindi speaking states, they often argue that they feel that Hindi is imposed on them forcefully. But to be fair to the center is genuinely interested in promoting all Indian languages, not just Hindi as a Rajabhasha or as a language of communication for official purposes, but even other regional languages and local dialects are actively promoted by the government of India and the concerned organs of the government. There are many initiatives focused on promoting not just the 22 official languages, but even the local dialects that are spoken. Within states, there are multiple different languages that are spoken, and there is adequate priority given for the protection of these languages. In India, we have a number of indigenous ethnic groups and tribal communities, several forest-dwelling tribes which have their own distinct language, which is closely linked with their culture and customs. And the government is deeply concerned about the protection of these languages. We even provide special protection to certain languages. A few historical languages have even been given the classical language status to protect and further promote and to celebrate the rich history of few languages. Right? Some of them have been recognized as classical languages of India. Now, can you find out which languages have been given this status, and please mention that in the comments below. So these are the 22 official languages recognized under the 8th schedule, and states are free to use these languages for official purposes as well, according to the needs of the local population. Right? Now, how valid is the concern and fears of Hindi imposition? Let's look at both sides of the argument. Let's be neutral and unbiased, and let's look at both sides of the argument. What the center says is that if we continue depending on English as a link language and as a medium of communication, and we continue using English for official purposes, that keeps perpetuating the colonial legacy, the colonial hangover. It keeps undermining the value, the historical, cultural significance of our own languages, of our motherland, our mother tongues. Studies have shown, there is empirical data to show that a child's intellectual mental capacity develops much better when they learn in their mother tongue, in their vernacular languages. That's why at the earliest level of schooling, there is a priority to teach the mother tongue, the local vernacular languages. Right? So the center is absolutely right when it says that we need to counter the colonial legacy associated with English. I'm sure many of you agree that at some personal level, we all have a perception that English is in some way superior to other languages. Right? Often, those who can't speak fluent English, they feel inferior about themselves as well, which shouldn't be the case. Every language has its own beauty. Every language is to be celebrated. But the perceived superiority of English is largely a result of the colonial legacy, the colonial hangover, and the colonial power in fact imposed English on India. So in this regard, the center is absolutely right. We need to find a common link language. In a country with so many different languages and such large linguistic diversity, you need a common link language, and Hindi could be a potential candidate, given the large number of Hindi speakers in the country, particularly in northern parts of India, right? And also across other parts of India as well. At least a decent amount of population understand Hindi, and they can at least be able to have a basic conversation in Hindi compared to any other language. So out of practical reasons, Hindi could be seen as the best possible link language if we have to counter the colonial legacy of English. But please understand that critics point out countering the colonial legacy and the perceived superiority of English should not come at the cost of undermining English. See, today India has a tremendous advantage in the world. We are the largest English speaking nation in the world. millions of people in India can not only understand English, but they can have a very good conversation in English. They are quite fluent. This allows India to be part of the global market. It enables our workforce, our students, to thrive better, perform better, thus drive our economic growth and development and our global linkages. Right? So, promoting Hindi or promoting other Indian languages should not come at the cost of undermining English. I hope you are understanding my point. There should not be a negative connotation to this. Promoting Hindi and Indian languages doesn't mean you destroy English. No. India's obsession with English has become an advantage for us, primarily for economic reasons, more practical reasons. So, down the line, a few generations down the line, if you were to undermine English, this could adversely affect India as well. So, promotion of Indian languages should not come at the cost of undermining English. That should not be the case. There should be a positive connotation to this. Yes, we need to counter the perceived superiority of English language and its colonial legacy, but it should not result in undermining of English. It should not be seen as English versus Hindi, Hindi versus non-Hindi languages. That should not be the case in a progressive liberal society. Right? We need to promote our local languages, absolutely. We need to promote our mother tongues, our vernacular languages, not at the cost of English. Right? We should not see this as an English versus Hindi debate or a Hindi versus non-Hindi debate. But non-Hindi states also have a valid concern. If you look at the criticism, non-Hindi speaking states, it could be Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Maharashtra as well, right? Northeast Indian states, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu. There are several states in India where Hindi is not the primary medium of communication. Hindi is largely cornered, restricted to a certain belt, maybe from Rajasthan to Madhya Pradesh to UP, Bihar, and of course some other states in bits and parts. But by and large, India is a non-Hindi speaking country, right? So, other states do have a valid concern that their state languages feel threatened. They feel concerned, worried that the center is bulldozing the imposition of Hindi. It is forcing the imposition of Hindi. If you look at what Amit Shah has said, Union Home Minister has said that after I became the Home Minister, I have removed English from all communication within the ministry and replaced it with Hindi. Now, on one hand, it might look like a good initiative. But imagine within Home Ministry, there could be officers from different cadres. Home Ministry would be communicating with different states. Of course, the state to center communication will still happen in English as well. But there could be many people who might face problems, challenges in understanding the language. MPs, for example, could face problems from different states in understanding text in Hindi. That's why English translation is provided. English is also one of the official languages of communication. So, bulldozing Hindi and imposing it without considering the concerns of the other side could lead to these fears that Hindi is being imposed on us. That's why at the state level in non-Hindi speaking states, there is strong opposition, strong mobilization happening on the ground to oppose the attempts of the center to forcefully impose Hindi on them. Right? So, it is a debatable matter, it's a controversial topic, I totally understand that. That's why I'm keeping the debate as balanced as possible, presenting both sides of the argument, both opinions. Let me know what you think. Should Hindi be promoted even at the cost of, let's say, undermining English and other Indian languages? Should we really need one language to bind us all? Should we turn into a homogeneous society? Or should we celebrate our diversity, promote all languages equally while removing the colonial legacy and hangover and the perceived superiority of English? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Now, to counterbalance the argument, there are critics who say that the center is imposing Hindi on them, right? But there is a counter argument here as well. The government of India has started an initiative. In fact, Home Minister Amit Shah spoke about the initiative yesterday during the event. He pointed towards the Bharatiya Bhasha Anubag or the Indian languages section. This has been set up as an initiative to promote translation of all documents, even literary works and articles from Hindi to other Indian languages and from other Indian languages to Hindi. Now let's say if you say that if the central government, let's say, switches more towards Hindi in official communication, non-Hindi speakers will have a problem. So Government of India has a solution to this. It has set up the Indian languages section, which will translate every article, speech, letter and document in Hindi to the other official languages of the country, the 22 official languages. So if you can't understand in Hindi, maybe you can read the document in your language. Similarly, the articles, literary work and speeches of other languages will be translated by this organization into Hindi, thereby enabling Hindi speakers to understand these essential documents which are not essentially in Hindi. So such initiatives are being undertaken by the government. But again, the counterpoint to this is that if Hindi is used across government work, across parliamentary work, this could create problems for non-Hindi speakers. Now recently you might have seen the criminal laws have been replaced with a new set of laws. If you look at the names, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, Bharatiya Sakshya Sanhita and the others, many people opposed it because it will not roll off your tongue easily if you are a non-Hindi speaker, right? And if the whole document is to be in Hindi, then the challenges would be more as well. Of course, the government does provide English translation, but this initiative, the initiative to translate the documents to other Indian languages, could help in this regard. But again, the fundamental question remains, should we really have a common link language? Is there a need to have a common link language in a diverse country, right? Hasn't India done very well till now, despite having diversity of languages? Of course, one challenge would be the perceived superiority of English, which undermines our Indian languages, which should not be the case. So if we are able to counter that, shouldn't all languages be equally promoted, and shouldn't we move away from a single language being imposed and promote the diversity of languages? That's why I asked your opinion as well. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. So on page 3, we have a related article. What about the language of communication in our higher judiciary? Because during yesterday's event, there was a top Hindi scholar who was sharing the stage with Amit Shah, and he pointed out that if we have to create a revolution in our language, that too in official language for state communication, he said that this revolution, this transformation should begin in our courts, especially our high courts and supreme courts. And this Hindi scholar who mentioned this is not wrong. Because if you look at the higher judiciary today, and if you look at the constitution as well, it clearly mandates only English as the language of communication. Within high courts and supreme courts, again for practical reasons, English was the only language allowed, and even now it is the same. Until Parliament by law provides for another language, English remains the language of official communication within your high court and supreme courts. Is that clear? But at the state level, as per Article 348 Clause 2, the governor, with the consent of the president, can provide for Hindi or any other official language to be used within the high court. So when arguments are made by the lawyers, when litigants want to, raise their points to the judge, or when judge has to issue the orders and write the judgment, when evidence has to be presented, when charge sheet has to be filed, the language used for communication is very critical in all these proceedings. According to the Constitution of India, English is currently the language promoted at High Courts and Supreme Court for the sake of practicality and ease of communication. Again, for the purpose of finding a common link, because the judges could be from other states, the lawyers could be from different states, different languages, litigants could be speaking different languages. So only option here is to be practical and use a common link language which has been English. But however, there is a criticism against this, a very valid criticism. One concern which has been raised by many legal experts and advocates as well is that, see, most litigants in many cases, they come from very poor background, they are from local regions. They may not understand Hindi, they may not understand English as well, right? In many cases, litigants are like mute spectators in a court. Advocates are talking in English, the judge is replying in English, all the documents are in English, right? This is with High Court and Supreme Court, not your subordinate courts. In subordinate courts, local languages are used. But litigants who come to high courts especially, where there are plenty of cases, they become mute spectators if they don't understand English. This in a way keeps people away from accessing justice as well. Right? People who are not comfortable with English, they may not be more comfortable in approaching high courts, thereby making justice inaccessible to a large section of our population. So there is an ongoing demand to introduce Indian languages in court. Few states have done that because, as I mentioned, under clause 2 of Article 348, governor can provide for the usage of Hindi or any other official Indian language with the consent of the president. So there are 4 states, for example, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, UP and Bihar, which have allowed Hindi to be used in the respective high courts. In the respective high courts, usage of Hindi is allowed, but not in other high courts. I think we have 25 high courts, only 4 of them are using Hindi apart from English. But in every other high court, it is English which is the medium of communication. Even at Supreme Court, it is English. Even the Constitution, which is written in English, is the only accepted version, not the Hindi version. Why? Because of ease of communication, the need for having a link language. But there is a very valid point that we should promote other languages in court as well. Hindi especially, and even the local languages according to the concerned region. Because the common people who are approaching the high courts for justice, they feel like mute spectators. They don't understand what's happening, even though the case involves them. Right? They may not be able to present their points and arguments if the need arises. Usually, arguments are made only by the advocates representing the litigant. The judges also don't encourage the litigants to directly, raise their points. But that should be the practice. If litigants want to, raise their point, and if they are comfortable in their own mother tongue, that should be allowed in courts. And there is a need to promote Hindi and Indian languages for official court communication. So this is a valid concern as well, and again a debatable topic because there are practical constraints and the question of Hindi getting imposed in place of English, right, which threatens the non-Hindi speaking states. So this is what you need to understand. Now let's look at a practice question. Examine the constitutional provisions related to official languages in India. Such a straightforward question can be given. So you can start out by talking about India's linguistic diversity. In the introduction, maybe if you're aware of some important facts, the number of languages spoken in India, right, or some interesting detail about India's linguistic diversity, you can mention that. And then you can discuss the constitutional provisions in the body. What does the constitution say about the official language for communication within the center, from center to state, state to state? Right, talk about Hindi as the Rajabhasha, English as a link language, right, and the 8 scheduled languages for official communication, and the whole debate. You can present the debate as well, the English versus Hindi debate, or better would be English versus Indian languages debate, perceived superiority of English because of its colonial legacy, and the Hindi imposition debate in non-Hindi speaking states. So try to bring that into your answer and conclude on a positive note. You should point out that this should not be about English versus Indian languages or Hindi versus non-Hindi languages. This should be about promoting our Indian languages, promoting our vernacular languages, right from a very young level, from the school level itself, and going all the way to the government, the parliament, and the judiciary, right? And this should not lead to undermining of any language. Promotion of Hindi should not be at the cost of English. Promotion of Hindi should not be at the cost of other Indian languages. Promotion of local Indian languages should not be at the cost of Hindi and English, right? So you can conclude on this note, which is a very positive end to your answer. You can point out that there should not be such a debate. We should not be pitting one language against the other. It's about equally promoting, protecting all languages so that we can draw the benefits of our linguistic diversity. Clear? Now let's look at the next topic. On page 16, we have a very important update related to Maldives. So let's take a quick look and understand what is this article, why is it important. Maldives, as you all know, is a small island state in the Indian Ocean. It has a strategic location located to the south of India, and it's an archipelago of islands. It's made up of hundreds of small atolls stretching all the way from the Chagos to the Lakshadweep Ridge. So there are hundreds of islands scattered over 1,000 plus kilometers from north to south direction, and this small country occupies a strategic location in the Indian Ocean. Historically, India has enjoyed fantastic relations with Maldives, but of late there has been trouble. In the last few years, we have seen the rise of anti-India sentiments under the India Out campaign, which has been promoted by few vested interests, few political parties and leaders who have taken a stand against India, and they are seen to be in favor of China. A few pro-China leaders and political parties are seen to be involved in promoting anti-India sentiments under India Out campaign. So this has even led to a backlash in India, right? We have studied this in our previous classes, and there has been a boycott Maldives campaign as far as Indian tourists visiting the country is concerned. But now what you need to understand here is that Maldives has a very vulnerable economy. The focus of this article is primarily the economy of Maldives. The economy of Maldives is very vulnerable, primarily because of its geography, its physical geography. It's not a contiguous country, it doesn't have a very large geographical size. It's made up of hundreds of small islands, right? Very small islands, and all these islands are very vulnerable. They are prone to global warming, rising sea levels. Many of them could get easily submerged. And Maldives doesn't have much of resources, doesn't have enough land, enough fresh water, right? Even for drinking water, it has to rely on desalination. So agriculture, large scale agriculture is out of the question. So Maldives' economy is limited to tourism and fisheries, apart from other minor sectors. So Maldives can never dream of having mega industries or large scale agriculture, right? This is impossible because of its geographical constraints. It's heavily dependent on fisheries and tourism, which is one of the biggest sources of revenue that sustains the country's economy. But of course, the country has certain needs. It has a need for infrastructure projects to build better maritime connectivity, to build sea bridges to link islands with one another, to build better airports to bring in more international tourists, right? To create better infrastructure for itself. It has other developmental needs, socio-economic welfare, to improve education, healthcare, and other indicators. So the revenue that Maldives generates from tourism and fisheries is simply not enough to fund and finance the economy of the country, especially when tourism takes a hit or other reliable sources of revenue take a hit. The economy of Maldives gets exposed to a period of instability. So over the decades, Maldives has faced such a crisis multiple times. It often relies on foreign debt. Because of this reason, it borrows heavily from other countries and from international donors, and it might fall under debt burden, resulting in a major debt crisis. Because of its small vulnerable economy, there comes a situation every now and then where Maldives is not able to repay the loans, it falls into a debt burden, and this triggers a major crisis in the economy of Maldives. So sometimes Maldives takes help from IMF, International Monetary Fund, which is meant to bail out such economies when they are facing a liquidity crisis. But most countries, especially developing, underdeveloped countries, they are not comfortable in taking help from the IMF. Because IMF, which is dominated by the West, by European Union and US, it imposes a lot of conditions which could compromise the economic sovereignty of a country. So unless it's a very dire situation like Sri Lanka or Pakistan, usually countries don't go to IMF for support. Now India being a trusted, reliable partner, we have always provided economic support to Maldives. We have given a lot of concessional loans. India has been a big investor in the country. In fact, if you look at the biggest foreign lenders to Maldives, China is the biggest lender. Most of the loans of Maldives is from China. China has funded several projects in Maldives, and the most loans are from China. Second would be India. So India has created many facilities to help Maldives, especially when it faces such a debt crisis. For example, many years ago, India had set up a standby credit facility of $100 million, which is readily available to Maldives whenever it faces a debt crisis. Through India's RBI, a ready credit facility has been set up, a permanent standby credit facility where Maldives can tap into this arrangement and draw $100 million and use that for dealing with the immediate liquidity requirements. And every now and then, when Maldives is not able to repay the loan, India provides for debt restructuring. We basically tell Maldives that, look, you don't have to repay the loan immediately. So we restructure the loan, we push the repayment period, reduce the interest rates further and make it easier for Maldives. And India also provides for currency swap arrangements. India's RBI and the central bank of the other country, they will swap their currencies, and the currency that we have given, right, which would be in dollars, will help the other country to tide over the liquidity crisis and then repay that back by exchanging the currencies. So currency swap is a very important arrangement between countries that helps the country suffering from a debt crisis, a liquidity crisis, to tide over the crisis. And we are also trying to settle trade in national currencies. This is another initiative that we have tried. Now Maldives is reaching out to both India and China. It's reaching out to both the countries to restructure the existing loans, to delay the repayments, to get some breathing space, to work out currency swap arrangements, and to try and establish trade through national currencies. So China is already stepping up to assist Maldives, and even India is in touch with Maldives to provide similar assistance. But it's very important to understand that of late, the flow of tourists from India has taken a big hit into Maldives. Because earlier this year, PM Modi visited Lakshadweep and promoted Lakshadweep as a popular tourist destination. Now this was seen as a competition between Maldives and Lakshadweep by few Maldivian ministers. And unnecessarily they tweeted against the Prime Minister, against India, using abusive language. This triggered Indian social media, which launched a campaign against Maldives called hashtag boycott Maldives. So this campaign discouraged lakhs of Indian tourists from going to Maldives, which was until then a popular tourist destination for Indians. In fact, even Indian tourists were the #1 tourists arriving in the country. They had overtaken China. But now, because of the boycott Maldives campaign, as a result of the tensions, Chinese tourists are the biggest flow of tourists into the country. So despite the decline in Indian tourists, tourists from China and other countries have picked up, and this has brought in sufficient revenue for Maldives to sustain its economy. But the increased expenditure and its inability to repay the loans it has borrowed is what pushes the country into the debt crisis. So earlier, a few months ago, India-Maldives had a complicated relationship because the new president, Mohammad Muizzu, he had taken an anti-India position. He was supporting India Out campaign. He won the elections based on India Out campaign, and even ordered India to remove the troops that we had stationed to maintain the military equipment that we had gifted to Maldives. He was seen as a pro-China leader. But following the emergence of the debt crisis and the economic crisis, Maldives has started toning down its position. In fact, when the controversy broke out over the Lakshadweep visit of the Prime Minister and when the boycott Maldives campaign began, Mohammad Muizzu government suspended those cabinet ministers who had used abusive language against India and against the Indian Prime Minister. So Maldives took action against them. Then Mohammad Muizzu has visited India for the swearing-in ceremony of Prime Minister Modi. Recently, our Foreign Minister Jaishankar has visited the country as well, launching new initiatives. So it appears that India-Maldives are repairing the damage. See, we met the demand of Mohammad Muizzu as well. We withdrew the military troops and we have replaced them with civilian personnel to maintain the Indian military equipment that we have gifted. At one point, Mohammad Muizzu was demanding that we should take back the aircraft and helicopters as well to completely remove Indian military presence. But both countries have found a middle ground. We have taken out the military troops because usually most countries are not comfortable with foreign troops on their soil. But we have convinced Maldives to retain the military equipment we have gifted to assist the country. And now we have deployed civilian personnel instead of the military personnel. So India also has met some demands of Maldives, and now Mohammad Muizzu appears to be correcting the path towards India. So he visited India earlier this year during the swearing-in ceremony of the Modi government, and there have been some signs of improvement in the relationship, and this could be largely because of the impending economic crisis that the country is facing. So India will be a key player to assist the economy of Maldives. We have always done that in the past as well. So Maldives is reaching out to China, its largest creditor, trying to work out restructuring of loans and currency swap arrangements and trade in national currency. India is also trying to work out similar arrangements to provide the required support, because this is what India promises under the Sagar Doctrine. Sagar Doctrine is a dedicated foreign policy doctrine focused on the Indian Ocean countries. It stands for security and growth for all in the region. Through this, we are promising security, maritime security and economic security for all countries in the Indian Ocean region. So whenever they face a crisis, be it a natural disaster or be it a conflict, right, or be it rising security threats like piracy, organized crime, terrorism, or be it an economic crisis or any other disaster, India will step up. India will be the first responder, and our goal is to emerge as the net security provider of the Indian Ocean. That's why India is the first country to help out any country in the Indian Ocean, be it Sri Lanka, be it Mauritius, Seychelles and others. So in line with that approach, India is more than willing to help Maldives, and we are working with the country to restructure the loans and provide any possible support to help the country overcome the liquidity crisis that it is facing. So that is what we take away from here. This could improve our relations as well, protect our strategic interests, counter the Chinese influence, and more importantly, Mohammad Muizzu has confirmed a bilateral visit to India. Usually, Maldivian leaders visit India first after getting elected. That was part of their India first policy, where they would give India the topmost priority. But Mohammad Muizzu, because of his initial anti-India position, he went to other countries like Turkey, China, and this obviously ticked off India. And now Mohammad Muizzu is correcting that. He visited India for the swearing-in ceremony, and right now a bilateral visit is being planned, which could lead to further improvement in the relations. So this is good for India as well, good for India-Maldives friendship, and let's see what happens in the coming days. Now moving on, please take up this practice question. Economy of Maldives is very vulnerable. How can India assist the island state in this regard? So use the points that I have mentioned, try to structure an answer based on this and post the answers in the comment section. Let's look at the next article from page number 9, again related to international relations. The United States, along with some of its Western allies, they have imposed sanctions on the Russian state broadcaster RT or Russian Times. Some of you would be familiar with this media organization called RT. This is the state broadcaster of Russia, the official media outlet of the Russian government. In the context of the ongoing Ukraine war, this Russian state media agency has been accused by Western governments of spreading disinformation. See, disinformation is basically fake news, mal and misinformation, information which is not entirely correct or completely wrong or which is not factual, with an intention of discrediting, with the intention of carrying out propaganda, with the intention of carrying out influence operations. See, generally intelligence agencies, they specialize in a form of warfare called psychological warfare or psy-war. Most intelligence agencies around the world engage in psychological warfare, where they leverage the media, even the internet and social media, to promote their narrative. So they might try to counter the narrative of their enemies and their hostile rivals, or they might even promote deliberate fake news and misinformation with an intent to spread propaganda, to influence the opinion of others, to change perceptions, to discredit others, what we call as disinformation. This is part of regular intelligence operations, where intelligence agencies engage in psychological warfare or psy-war by using media outlets, be it a newspaper or TV channels, radio as well, and internet and social media platforms. So either they will spread the actual narrative, which is the truth, the factual story, to counter the propaganda of the enemies and the rivals, or they themselves could spread wrong information, deliberate misinformation and malinformation with an intention of discrediting someone, of with the intention of countering a propaganda and creating a certain perception which is in the interest of that country. So such campaigns are often referred to as influence operations. Almost every country does this. During peak of Cold War, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency of the US, pioneered in such influence operations by leveraging media outlets and even the popularity of Western culture, Hollywood, right? Through Hollywood movies as well. CIA would actively promote Western culture, Western influence to counter the socialist propaganda. And China is a pioneer in influence operations. In the last few decades, as China has risen as a global aggressive expansionist power, Chinese intelligence is known to engage in such influence operations. They even work with the Chinese diaspora around the world to promote the Chinese story, to promote the Chinese narrative, right, so that it protects Chinese interests. Between India, Pakistan as well, we have seen such psychological warfare operations between ISI and RAW. When Pakistan promotes a certain narrative against India, we counter that with our own media narrative and media management. So this is part of intelligence operations, and we collectively call them as influence operations. So United States and its Western allies are accusing RT, a Russian state media broadcaster, of being involved in disinformation campaigns on behalf of Russian intelligence. The US has even collected evidence to tie RT with Russian intelligence operatives, and it is alleging that Russian agencies are running this propaganda campaign to build the Russian narrative, which is a false narrative that goes against Ukrainian and Western interests. That is why the United States, along with UK and Canada and many other US allies, are levying sanctions on the Russian media outlets. It's not just the state broadcaster RT which is being isolated and targeted, but even other Russian media companies like RIA, Novosti, Ruptly, Sputnik. These are some popular Russian media outlets. They're all being targeted, their journalists are being targeted, their funds are being targeted. In fact, the US has revoked the accreditation which is given to foreign journalists. For foreign journalists to report from another country, they should get accredited. They should follow the rules and regulations regarding reporting, foreign reporting through foreign journalists, right? Their journalistic licenses are being revoked by US and other Western governments. Now, US is not stopping at this. It is pushing other countries as well, including India, to follow the same. The US is working with other countries, India and many others, trying to share this evidence with them that RT and other Russian media outlets are engaging in disinformation and influence operations on behalf of Russian intelligence agencies, and they are urging other countries also to ban the Russian media outlets. Now look at the hypocrisy of this. See, we understand when two rivals engage in propaganda against each other. It is natural. If Pakistan targets India, India will also target Pakistan with information campaigns. Same with US and Russia. But going to the extent of asking other countries to ban Russian journalists, impose sanctions on Russian media companies, is the heights of hypocrisy of Western democracies. Because the very same countries, they allow extremists to conduct public rallies. They allow terrorists to organize and assemble in the name of freedom of speech and expression. I am referring to the revival of Khalistan movement in Canada, US and Western countries. When India raises its voice against Canadian authorities, American authorities, European authorities, not acting against the extremists, allowing them to conduct public rallies and allowing them to deliver hate speech against India, allowing them to promote radicalism against India to revive terrorism against the country. When these activities are allowed, when we oppose them, these governments defend their decisions by saying that we are a liberal, open democracy. We allow for all views and opinions. We allow for counter opinions to be tolerated because we are the land of free speech and expression. They claim this moral high ground. But now, when the propaganda doesn't serve their interests, when it's going against their interests, they are banning media outlets, banning journalists, imposing sanctions on media companies, which essentially violates freedom of speech and expression. So this American propaganda will not work because global south, developing countries, underdeveloped countries will reject this. If US does this on its own, it's fine. US and Western countries have every right to do it on their own. Urging others is the problem. For example, US accuses India of having very less press freedom. right? There are many American government reports criticizing India for not protecting press freedom in the country, right? Let's say Indian government acts against a certain media outlet or against certain journalists. US interferes in India's internal matters, criticizing India of violating freedom of speech and expression. Now the US is going to the extent of urging India and others to do the same. And now somehow freedom of speech and expression doesn't get violated. So former Indian diplomats have rejected this hypocritical approach of the US, and of course India is not going to follow this. The US State Department has been putting pressure on Ministry of External Affairs to follow the American sanctions on Russian media companies, to ban them, to take away the accreditation of Russian journalists in India. But India is going to reject this. Former diplomats also have pointed out the hypocrisy of the American policy. See, two countries can do that to each other. Like Russia can ban American media outlets. US, let them ban Russian media outlets. It's their internal decision. But they can't urge and force others like India to follow their decisions. This is where they become hypocritical. This is where they somehow forget freedom of speech and expression all of a sudden, while the same government allows extremist outfits to conduct rallies against our country. So this is something that you need to think about as far as modern day warfare is concerned. Because modern day warfare, hybrid war, is not just about physical war in the battlefield, right? In fact, from ancient times, Psy war has played a big role. Psychological warfare is nothing new. It didn't start only with media and social media and internet. Fake news, misinformation, disinformation has existed since ancient times, right? So please spend some thought on this. Understand how such influence operations can play a role in geopolitics, especially during times of conflict. So two rivals who are involved in the conflict, if they engage in this, it is absolutely understandable. That is the nature of warfare. But expecting others to follow that when they themselves don't protect our interests is absolutely hypocritical, and India is likely to reject this American demand. Next, on page 16, we have an update on Russia-Ukraine conflict. Both Russia and Ukraine have swapped 206 POWs, prisoners of war. They have swapped 206 prisoners, 103 prisoners each. Ukraine had captured 100 plus Russian soldiers in the Kursk region during the recent invasion into Russian territory. And Russia also had captured several Ukrainian soldiers. There are many more in custody even now, thousands of them. But both sides have agreed to a swap, an exchange of POWs, and they shortlisted 103 from each other's custody, and they have been exchanged. They have been swapped. And this deal was brokered by United Arab Emirates. Now, this is generally seen during the course of a conflict. It's nothing new. There is a history of exchanging POWs. Again, if you go back to the Cold War period, when US and Soviet Union were targeting each other with intelligence operations, they would arrest and detain several intelligence operatives, right? And eventually they would swap them. US and Soviet Union, right? Their agencies, CIA, FBI, then KGB from Soviet Union, they would have detained the intelligence operatives and the informants of the other country. And eventually they would be swapped, usually in neutral places like Vienna in Austria, right? So this was called a spy swap. And in wars, in conflict, in actual physical confrontation, there is a history of swap of POWs. This is a standard practice as well. Between India and Pakistan, for example, in 1971, when we defeated Pakistan and liberated Bangladesh, India held 93,000 Pakistani POWs in custody, right? So we eventually returned the Pakistani POWs after the Shimla Agreement was signed. Clear? So this is not the first time it's happening in the Ukraine war as well. Over the last 2 years, there have been many such prisoner swaps, which was brokered by Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and United Arab Emirates. So these three West Asian powers, which have good relations with Moscow and Ukraine, they have acted as mediators, and every now and then there is a swap of POWs. Now, why are we discussing this? See, I want you to understand the rights of POWs. I want you to understand who exactly are prisoners of war. Is there any international law that protects their basic rights, and why countries facilitate the swap of POWs? That is what we need to learn. It's a very important topic, by the way, because we ourselves have dealt with POWs in our previous wars and conflicts. So first, to define who is a POW, prisoner of war. So essentially, a combatant who is captured alive. During a war, let's say two parties are at war, right? If a soldier, a combatant, who's an active soldier, right? If the soldier is captured by the enemy, this captured soldier, the combatant, becomes a POW, a prisoner of war. Clear? Now, such POWs are at great risk. Given the enmity, the hostility present, the other country which has captured the soldiers might target them, torture them, commit brutal atrocities on them, and even carry out killings, which is a violation of human rights. When a soldier has been captured, when a soldier has surrendered, laid down their arms and weapons, he is no longer a combatant, right? So, principles of war dictate that non-combatants should never be targeted. They should not be humiliated, they should not be tortured or punished, their human rights should be held supreme. So, that is why we have an international law in place. Because during World Wars, World War I, World War II, millions of POWs were abused, killed and tortured. Massive human rights violations were committed because there was no international law. So, following the Second World War in 1949, the Third Geneva Convention was adopted, the convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war. So, under the Geneva Conventions, we have 4 different conventions. The Third Geneva Convention deals with the human rights of POWs, how POWs are to be treated. So, once a combatant is captured, they become a non-combatant, they become a POW, and they should be given all the basic rights. The country which has captured them, they can't torture them, they can't threaten them, they can't embarrass them or intimidate them, right? They can't use such aggressive tactics, even during interrogation. Let's say, see, standard practice is that when you capture an enemy soldier or even an intelligence operative, you obviously debrief them and you conduct an interrogation to collect some intelligence from them. But according to international law and the Third Geneva Convention, POWs are not obligated to reveal any information other than the prescribed minimum information. They are mandatorily supposed to give out their name, their military number, their unique military number which is given within the armed force, their date of birth and their serial number. Now, you might have seen in many movies where soldiers are captured, they keep uttering the same thing. Whatever question the interrogator is asking, they only tell their name, this is my military serial number, this is my code number, this is my date of birth. That's the only thing they keep repeating for whatever question which is asked. For example, you might remember after the Balkot airstrikes, an Indian fighter pilot was captured in Pakistan. Wing Commander Abhinandan was taken as POW. That video of interrogation was also released, and Abhinandan kept repeating the same thing. For whatever was asked to him, whatever question was posed to him, he would give only one reply, one standard reply, which was the name, the military number, this is my service, this is my date of birth, right? This is a minimum requirement expected under international law. Apart from this, a POW should not be forced, should not be intimidated, tortured or threatened to reveal any other information. Is that clear? And obviously, POWs cannot be killed. Clear? They can be prosecuted, however, in a court of law by following due process. Prosecution can be taken up if they have been involved in grave crimes against the citizens of your country during the wartime. Clear? So, they should be given equal treatment, their basic rights have to be protected. You need to take care of their basic well-being. You should give them a decent shelter. They should be provided with food and water, medicines and medical care because they might be injured. Combatants might have lost their limbs, their eyes, or they might be brutally injured, right? They might be suffering from life-threatening conditions. So, immediate medical care has to be given. Protecting human life is a priority because this POW is no longer a security threat. He is not a combatant anymore. He's become a non-combatant, right? So, accordingly, all basic rights have to be provided under the Third Geneva Convention. If there is a violation, this can be tried as a war crime. This can be brought up at international platforms like International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court. And the affected country can argue that the enemy country has violated international law, it has committed war crimes. And accordingly, action can be taken as well against those leaders and officials who ordered the violation of rights of POWs. So, India is a great example in this regard. In 1971, when we held 93,000 Pakistani POWs, we not only accommodated all of them and treated them with utmost respect, but India ensured that all their rights were guaranteed and protected. India never abused any Pakistani POW, and after the Shimla Agreement, we returned all the POWs as per international law. International law mandates the swap, the return of POWs. You can't hold them forever. In some cases, yes, you can prosecute them if there is evidence of their criminal involvement, but otherwise, they have to be returned. That is why swap of POWs is a very common practice. Clear? So please go through the points present here, which talks about the rights of POWs, the obligations on the country which has detained the POWs. It's called the detaining power, right? So Russia, Ukraine, which have detained hundreds of each other's soldiers, are regularly swapping their POWs through mediation from Saudi, UAE and Turkey. So this completes my detailed analysis of the big articles. Now let's take a quick look at the prelim section. So before that, before I start the prelims articles, you can join my Telegram channel. You can scan the QR code or you can search for the channel name, as I will be sharing a lot of updates and important notes as well on my Telegram channel. Now let's start with the prelims articles. We have this article on page number 8 related to the Ashtamudi Lake in Kerala. Ashtamudi Lake is one of the most important wetland ecosystems in our country. According to the article, at 4 locations that were studied by the Central Pollution Control Board for water quality under the National Water Quality Monitoring Program, the water quality was seen to be unfit as per the minimum criteria, the primary water quality criteria laid down under the Environment Protection Act for the purposes of bathing. That shows the extent of pollution in this critical water body. Ashtamudi Lake in the Kollam district of Kerala has become so polluted that it has become unfit for bathing purposes. Is that clear? So Central Pollution Control Board that implements the Water Act, tackles water pollution. It runs a national program called National Quality Monitoring Program. It measures water samples and it basically quantifies the water quality around the country. It works in coordination with state pollution control boards. So under the EPA, Environment Protection Act of 1986, there is a minimum water criteria, primary water criteria for drinking, for bathing, for different purposes. So according to this study, at none of these locations the water was found to be fit for bathing. So that is the concern being raised here. Lot of microplastic contamination and severe toxic elements and heavy elements were found in the study. This study was funded by the Erasmus program of European Union. See, this is a separate point. I want you guys to know what is the Erasmus program of the EU. Since India is one of the partners of EU in this program, UPSC might ask a basic question on this. What is the Erasmus program? What is it related to? Which organization runs this program? It's run by European Union. It's essentially a student research exchange program. EU ties up with other countries where students and researchers are exchanged to promote the ecosystem of research and innovation and to promote people-to-people relations. So funded by this program of the EU, the study has found that the water in Ashtamudi Lake is not fit for bathing. It's below the primary water criteria as prescribed under Environment Protection Act. And the water quality was determined by CPCB under the National Water Quality Monitoring Program. Now, there could be a question on Ashtamudi Lake itself, based on the geography, right? So you should know that it is located in the state of Kerala in Kollam district, and it's a very unique wetland ecosystem, one of the largest wetland ecosystems in Kerala and in India. See, the longest wetland ecosystem would be Vembanad. Now look at the map here. In coastal Kerala near Kochi, you can find the Vembanad Lake, one of the longest lakes and wetland ecosystems in the country. And this is where Kerala is known for its beautiful backwaters, backwater based tourism, the popular boats, right? The Kerala styled boats, which are very popular amongst tourists, both Indian and foreign tourists. And even the ecological value of Vembanad is something which is very well known, right? It's home to rich biodiversity of aquatic organisms and even bird species. Similarly, down south in Kerala, you have the Ashtamudi Lake over here in the Kollam district. Ashtamudi is the second largest in Kerala after Vembanad, right? Even Ashtamudi is known for its unique biodiversity. and it is one of the Ramsar sites in India. It's recognized as a wetland of international importance. It's known for backwater tourism, right? Even Ashtamudi Lake is popular for backwater tourism, and it is also a rich ground for migratory birds. It's one of the important sites identified by the International Bird Association, right? So, Vembanad and Ashtamudi both are very important wetland ecosystems in Kerala. Now, coming to another article from page 11, a study has established that retreat of glaciers which is happening in polar areas, in Himalayas, etc. We might think it is dangerous, it is deadly for human life, for the environment, but there are some advantages as well. So, let us understand what this study has found out. See, our general understanding of global warming is that as the global temperatures rise, it will lead to melting of ice caps and glaciers. Correct? We have already seen evidence of this. Himalayan glaciers are melting at an accelerated rate, resulting in more floods. Polar ice caps are melting, clearing the shipping lanes in Arctic and Antarctic, creating environmental threats both in North and South Pole. This is our common understanding that melting of glaciers and ice caps is a major hazard, right, which could be devastating. Rising sea levels could submerge most of the coastal areas and cities. It could permanently change the climatic and weather patterns, leading to more extreme weather events, right. These are the negative side that we know about glacial retreat or melting of glaciers and ice caps. But a study has established there could be some positives as well. See, when glaciers retreat, they leave behind a barren piece of land or a barren ecosystem. Is that clear? For example, in the Himalayas, if the glaciers are melting, it leaves behind a arid, barren land, correct? Or let us say if it is happening in polar areas, then essentially you are looking at a very barren marine ecosystem. Now, this ecosystem will start evolving immediately. Studies have established that the primary process of life and evolution will begin. Microorganisms will begin to take over this ecosystem, from various bacteria to protozoans to algae especially, right, because algae can take part in photosynthesis. So, be it bacteria, algae and protozoans, these microorganisms will take over the barren ecosystem over a period of time. Eventually, they trigger the life processes. The chain reaction begins, which essentially enables the biogeochemical cycles. See, the organic world, where you find the life forms, they take inorganic material from the earth and they move it around in the entire ecosystem. For example, water, oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus. These are essential nutrients, essential building blocks of life. So, organisms take those inorganic substances, use it to build life, to create energy, to essentially give rise to the entire food chain, the entire ecosystems, and essentially the inorganic material gets circulated in the entire system, right. So, we have our carbon cycle, our water cycle, phosphorus cycle, nitrogen cycle, etc. So, these biogeochemical cycles get accelerated once microorganisms take over a new ecosystem. Then eventually over a period of time, they pave the way for the next level of organisms, maybe lichens, moss, right, and this further leads to maybe very small plants, shrubs and trees, and parallelly you will see that the ecosystem will be thriving with other life forms, from insects to worms to eventually animals as well, right. So, ecosystem can undergo this long period of evolution, and that is what the study has shown, that if there is glacial retreat, it is not entirely bad, there is a good which will happen as well. Eventually over decades and centuries and millenniums, the new ecosystems will create new life forms, new ecosystems will thrive, new food chains will be created, and this could actually help in climate mitigation as well in the long run, right? It could help in climate mitigation. So usually we depict this ecological process using this image. When you have a barren piece of land, a newly exposed land, right? This is where microorganisms begin their work. They are like the architects of our ecosystem. They build the essential building blocks. They initiate the biogeochemical cycles. Then it might be taken over by lichens and moss and grass and going to plants and shrubs and trees, along with enabling other life forms, complex life forms. Now, in ecology, there is a technical term attached to this process. Can you tell me what is it? In the comments, please let me know what is the technical term, the jargon that we use to refer to this ecological transition that happens in a given ecosystem, right? So please find this out, and I'll give the answer as well in the comment section in my Telegram channel tomorrow, right? So in my Telegram channel tomorrow, I'll post the answer for this, but now let's see if you can post the answer in the comments. Tell me what is the technical term used for this ecological change that happens. Next, on page 13, we have another article related to science and technology. Mpox or monkeypox has created a scare around the world as the infectious disease has spread to multiple countries. WHO has identified it as a public health concern, right? It's been identified as a public health concern of international emergency. So given the risk and given the increasing spread of Mpox, it has become all the more urgent to find solutions to combat Mpox. And the best solution for any disease is a vaccine. And studies have established that a smallpox vaccine is quite effectively moderately effective against Mpox infections. There's a very popular smallpox vaccine called Ankara Bavarian Nordic. It's a smallpox vaccine. It uses a modified live version of the virus, right? And the studies have established that the same vaccine can be around 58% effective in preventing Mpox infections. So it's not the perfect solution, but at least it gives hope that we at least have a readily available vaccine which can be moderately efficient in curbing the spread of the disease. Clear? So this could pave the way, it could pave the path for better vaccines as well, which are currently under development. So that is what you need to note. Coming to the last article for today. On the same page, we have an article referring to the hazardous impact of ground level ozone. I am sure all of you are familiar with ozone or O3, right? Ozone is very critical in the higher levels of the atmosphere, in the stratosphere, as it acts like a shield protecting Earth and life from the harmful impact of UV radiation. This is something I am sure all of you are familiar with, right? You all know that ozone is found at the higher levels in the atmosphere, in the stratosphere. It's acting like a shield protecting Earth and life from the harmful, deadly effect of UV radiation. Without the ozone layer, life on Earth would have been impossible, correct? But did you also know ozone can be present at ground level within the troposphere, very close to the surface of the ground? Now this ozone is distinct, very different from your stratospheric ozone. So the question is, how does this ozone form at the ground level and why is it hazardous? What is its impact? Let's take a quick look. Ground level ozone is mainly a result of anthropogenic processes, not natural processes. The pollutants, the emissions from vehicles, from industries, right? We are emitting oxides of nitrogen and many VOCs or volatile organic compounds into the atmosphere. When vehicles burn fossil fuels, they are releasing oxides of nitrogen and along with VOCs. Industries, factories, right? Whichever industry using fossil fuel, when they burn them, the emissions will contain oxides of nitrogen and VOCs. So these elements, they essentially combine, they become part of a chemical process triggered by sunlight. It's a photosensitive process. So under the presence of sunlight, the emissions from vehicles, various factories, industries, chemical plants, refineries, this will interact with VOCs and they form O3 essentially. These chemical reactions, which is a photosensitive reaction, results in the formation of ozone at the ground level. It's also called tropospheric ozone or ground level ozone, present just a few feet above the surface of the Earth. Now this ozone is deadly. It is an air pollutant. It is a recognized air pollutant. Is this clear? When you are exposed to an environment where there is ground level ozone, your skin will start itching. You might start developing skin rashes. Your eyes will start getting irritated and become watery. And more importantly, it can lead to respiratory problems, especially for senior citizens, those who are suffering from asthma and other pulmonary respiratory disorders. This could be a deadly nightmare. So ground level ozone is extremely hazardous for human life. It's a notorious air pollutant. Even in our air quality index, we measure ground level ozone as one of the air pollutants. Now a new study has confirmed its impact on plant life and tree life, especially in tropical areas. Tropical forest growth gets significantly stunted when there is ground level ozone pollution. Is that clear? So this reduces the carbon sequestration as well. 290 million tons of carbon is going uncaptured in tropical areas, in tropical forests, because the forests are getting affected. The growth of the forest is getting stunted because of ground level ozone pollution. So that is the environmental impact of ground level ozone. So on this note, I would like to conclude my discussion for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed the session, learnt all the topics, and if you benefited, do support us with your likes and comments. Because as I said, that is what keeps us motivated and it pushes us to do better for you. So that is it. Do subscribe to our channel. We'll see you tomorrow again. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.